Hey, welcome back to another story. I love these narratives. Today we have Tim Woods. We actually met through Lego, which is interesting because of my Lego background, and I've always called Lego a connector. And truly, in this case, it has connected Tim and I together. So it might be a little confusing on this one because both of our first names are Tim, but we'll try to keep it clear for you guys. But I want to introduce Tim. He lives down in Illinois. We've met through several Lego conventions. We've talked several times. I've actually been a guest on his Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives for some of the Lego stuff. So I'm really excited to hear about the whole story of what you've got in your life, Tim, rather than just the highlights that we've talked about quite a bit.
Right.
So welcome. I'm really, really thankful you're here. I'm really glad to be able to be doing this with you.
Good talking to you again. Great to be here.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and open up because as we've said before, we try to keep this in a nice consecutive or conceptual. That's not the right word, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. Try to keep it in a pattern of the 10 minute, 10 minute, 10 minutes. So let's get into the belief systems or the things that you thought growing up that as you entered into your adulthood, what were those things that you really kind of latched onto and said, this is how life is going to be?
Well, I was raised in a Christian home. I was raised Church of God, which was non-Pentecostal. It was a non-denominational Church of God, and the way I was raised was it was dress right dress. All right, so everything had to be shirt and tie. You know, you had to present yourself accordingly. And then as far as doctrine views, one of the things that just kind of boggled my mind was on their belief was Satan was never in heaven. Okay. That was one of the things that's, okay. I took and ran with it as a child. All right. He was never in heaven. And the more that I studied as I became an adult, I realized, you know what? That's not what the Bible's telling me. He's telling me that he fell and took a third of the angels with him. And, reading that, discovering that myself, that was one of the things that, that kind of gave me a little bit of a setback. So it made me kind of question the core values and beliefs that were instilled in me at that time. I was told that, when you present yourself at church, you got to have that shirt and tie on. You got to look a certain way. You got to dress a certain way. You got to act a certain way. To a certain point, yes, okay. But as I entered adulthood and that transition from when I got married till about my youngest son is 21 now. I had to think about that, Tim. My youngest is 21 now. That makes me old, doesn't it? But he's 21 now. Between the point that I got married was 95. I was working for a tire manufacturer at that time. And to the point that my son was 7, 8 years old, there was an aspect there to where I didn't really want anything to do with the church.
It's interesting. Let's pause on that. Let's maybe peel back a couple layers of the onion here, proverbially, because I think a lot of us and people that are in our age group, what do you want to call us, the Gen Xers or the Boomers or whatever,
Right.
We grew up in church. That was the thing that was kind of inbred in us. Of you go to church every weekend, and a lot of us our age, we actually have something in the background of a church or something that goes along that. And then all of a sudden you find something that you were taught in the church aspect of it to, my brain is like breaking because I've had this exact same situation. So I'm just like, I know
Okay.
exactly what you're saying here, but it shakes you almost to the core because all of a sudden you realize something that you were taught is not what was actually written. And it sounds like you kind of hit a point in there, and I kind of want to dive into that a little bit more. Like what was that all of a sudden? Like, how did that happen in regards to, like, oh my goodness, things that I've been taught for 10 years, 15 years, all through childhood, all of a sudden it's like, that's not actually the way it is. And you were taught to dress right and act right, right? But there was never
Right.
that relationship going on. But like, what was that shaking moment like? I mean, because you said you're kind of starting to dive into the fact that you just totally walked away from the church aspect. But what was that wake up? What was that?
Well, so what happened was I committed my life to Christ in high school, okay, and was never baptized until my son was 7. And what happened, I would put in all kinds of ridiculous hours at this tire manufacturer. And to the point, I mean, you're talking 12, 14 hours shifts, plus an hour drive time there and back. That was my life. And I knew right from wrong. I knew how I should act, but I wasn't acting that way. So what happened, I can remember very vividly. I was getting ready to go in on a midnight shift. And some people will call it a dream. Some people will call it a nightmare. Some people may say vision. But I have no doubt it was God saying, wake up. So this was approximately, I want to say it was probably 8 o'clock in the evening. And I was out cold. And I remember, because when Lisa came into the room, I was sitting upright in bed, sweating nonstop. But what transpired was I was sitting there, and in this vision, dream, whatever, it was bright as day out. Okay. It seemed like it was high noon, light outside, and basically setting in hell was this vision that I had, this nightmare dream. And the message was, listen, you've been taught, right from wrong. Now, as far as the doctrine side, that was, we'll get into that. But he said, right from wrong. You're not living it. If you were to die right now, this is where you'd be. And I can remember that vividly. And I was sitting up in bed, screamed out her name. She come running down the hall. She said, what in the world is wrong? And there I was, just sitting there, right straight up in bed, sweating. I said, I'm not living the way I'm supposed to be living. So we were attending First Christian Church at that time, and still are. And I said, I've got to talk to the pastor now. I said, I've never walked the walk that I was called to do. I said, I've never been baptized. This is wrong. I said, it has to be made right now. And I can remember reaching out. Our pastor was Jason at the time. Reached out to him, and I said, listen, I'm getting ready to go to work. I got to swing by the church. I need baptized. I said, this needs to be made correct. And the reason I know, I told you my son was approximately 7 years old. It was November because I turned around and ended up baptizing him right there at that time. Now, from that point on, did I have a roller coaster life? Yeah, I mean, we had our ups and downs, but I started investing in the word more, digging in more. I was always the type of guy, though, that would always want to be backstage. All right. I didn't really totally commit to my walk until approximately 3 years ago, to where, not that I wasn't a Christian, I want to be that guy that came in, sat on the pew, warmed the pew, and then whatever needed to be done in the background, that was me. Okay. I didn't want any spotlight on me. I didn't want to talk to anybody. This wouldn't have happened at all. This wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. And the turning point 3 years ago was a battle between me and God on me trying to climb down off the wall, trying to get off the wall as far as we talk about Nehemiah when he was on the wall, rebuilding the wall for Jerusalem. And he was distracted. He was pulled in multiple directions, but he stayed on the wall. I was on the wall, but where I was led to, I didn't want to stay on the wall. And I was trying to climb down off that wall. And because I had different opportunities that come up, and they wasn't opportunities. They were callings. This is where you need to be.
Mm.
You know, this opportunity's open. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is what I was supposed to be doing. But it's like, you know what? I'm not qualified for that. I can't do that. That's not me. You know, I don't get up in front of a group of 20, 30 people and teach them about God. You know, I'll make sure that they show up and we keep them corralled and keep them contained and keep them safe. I said, but I'm sorry, that's not me as far as, you know, teaching these kids. And it was.
So I'm going to pause you on that point there. So what made you feel that you weren't qualified? What was the, I mean, like, was that a belief system that came through the time of, you know, growing up, or was it the fact that there were lies in your head, a narrative that was a false narrative? Like what made you feel unqualified? The reason why I'm asking this too is because this is really, I think, a thing that everybody struggles with, whether you're in the business world, you're in the church, or even in our own personal lives. Is there's times when we're asked to do something, asked to step up. You're using the illustration of being on the wall. We're asked to be on the wall, but yet we don't feel qualified to be on the wall. So what was going on at that point in time that was really driving that?
So in that meantime, you know, like I said, you know, I would help out in the background. My wife and I, we taught a third and fourth grade class on Wednesday nights with for our youth minister at that time. And I always played second fiddle. The reason being was going back to the way I was raised and the doctrine of the church that we attend now, and digging into that and their beliefs and reading the Bible and having a pastor that was capable of saying, listen, this is why. Let's take this back to Greek. Let's take this back to Hebrew and explain to it, you know, to me in and out, and be able to sit down and not just take his word for it. Where I was raised, I hate to say this, you heard the old cliche, you know, it's my way or the highway.
Yeah. And
that's pretty much the way it was. If you were to challenge what was being preached from the pulpit, you were basically considered an outcast. That's not the way we're taught. You know, you got to do it this way. You know, if you don't have this belief, then you don't need to be here. And that's the way I was raised. And having that conviction where you're being led and not just, listen, this is what's being preached. Here's the text, dig into it yourself. And then you start reading and you start rightly dividing the word of God, and you're digging in deeper. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know what? This makes perfect sense. This is crystal clear. And then you have a pastor that's stepping up, and Pastor TJ is absolutely amazing. And, you know, stepping in, it's like, all right, this is what's going on. Let's break it down to the Greek. And that's what he does. And when you're sitting there and you're listening to all that, and you're thinking, well, this is the way I was taught, man, I'm not qualified to teach this because I'm kind of learning some of this myself right now. You know, how am I called to teach this? And that was a few years back. That was actually, we're probably pushing 5 or 6 years ago at that time. And Pastor TJ, he's been in the past 3 years. And, you know, I was digging in before, and I'm thinking, I can't teach a class full time. You know, I can't work with a youth group as far as, all right, here's the Bible. You've got this question. Let's dig into the word and see what the Bible says about it. I wasn't comfortable doing that because of my beliefs as a child were just kind of going the wrong direction. of what the Bible actually said, and trying to, put that in perspective and learn some of that myself. Once I finally sat down and started doing what the Bible commands us to do, like I said, to rightly divide the word, invest in him and spend time in him, it became crystal clear.
Well, I think it's truly, and whether, again, we're talking about religion or even in, I know a lot of listeners are in the corporate world as well. It doesn't matter that institution. There's a lot of people out there that say it's my way or the highway. Like that,
Right.
that piece right there is absolutely key. And I think a lot of us grew up under that, I call it a regime of it's my way or the highway. And it's really caused us to be hesitant to share what we have found, and which is what I think
Right.
teaching is. And that's what you're doing. And no matter if it's in the business or if it's in the church or wherever, it's tough to shake that stigma off of our shoulders, just the fact of trying to be different than what it was that we were raised.
Right. Absolutely.
So it
So,
sounds like there was a couple of big things in there that kind of caused you to twist. Was there any one key element other than the vision that you were talking about? Was there anything else? Because you said you're trying to get back off the wall. So you had one major event, and then it sounds like you had another major event, and then now you're at your stage of moving forward with where you're at currently. And I mean, we're not young geezers anymore. So.
no, we're not. that we definitely are not. So the major turning point, I had a couple, like you said. The major turning point was about a little over 3 years ago. And so, like I said, I was that guy. I didn't want the spotlight on me.
Yep.
And our youth minister of 30 years, a gentleman by the name of Tim Mules, passed away December of 2019. And I think it was late January of 2020, our new pastor, TJ, came in. And TJ, I'll hook you up with him. You'll definitely will be inspired and just, I don't want to say awestruck, but I mean, this guy is just, he's mind-boggling as far as the knowledge that he has. But I guess that comes with about 7 doctorates. But anyway, he came in. It was late January of 2020. And I can remember we were having our first Wednesday night with him. And my wife and I were standing outside his office, and we're getting ready to leave. And my wife's office is right next door to his office. And he's like, I need to ask you guys something. Have you thought about a Christian school? It's like, absolutely. I thought about a Christian school. That would be great. I said, Lisa and I said, we graduated from a Christian school, and I think that vision's awesome. He said, what about youth? What about the youth leadership? What about a youth leader? He said, is that a you thing? Is that a her thing? Is that both you guys? He said, how does that look? And Tim, immediately, my response was, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. That's going to have to be a her thing. I've got a full-time job.
Right.
And I said, I got a family to support. I can't do that. And here's the thing. I pushed it off on her, and she was working at the post office, and she had already stepped in as a volunteer of Director of Student Ministries at that time, since Tim's passing. Now we're going to make it confusing. So
then we got another
Tim. There's 3 Tims now. But since his passing, she had stepped in, and our pastor at that time, before TJ came in, it's like, are you going to step up? I said, nope. I'll stay in the background and I'll help out. You tell me where I'm needed and I'll help out, but I'm not stepping forward. So I helped her out, and she done that for over a year. I'm probably pushing 18 months, actually, a year and a half, where she volunteered. And she was working a full-time job. She was within steps away of becoming postmaster for the post office. And she was doing that. full time. She was doing director of student ministries as a volunteer full time. So that conversation was probably late January, mid-February with our pastor. And then March 1st, I never had issues with my back. I started with major back issues, back pain to where it hurt to walk.
Hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? So I ended up going to pain management. So I called the doctor. He said, man, let's try pain management. We don't need surgery yet. I said, okay. And of course, they done some x-rays and they sent me this pain management and they done a spinal epidural. So this will last 3 to 6 months. I think you just got some back pain going on. It doesn't seem like anything major. I said, okay. It lasted 3 weeks. Thinking, all right, never had back issues. And now this. So I ended up going back to the doctor, and it was the Thursday before Easter. And I had another spinal epidural. Now they tell you when you get these that the first couple days you'll get no effect. And it's usually about the third day, it'll take hold and you're going to start feeling good. Well, Thursday evening, I felt great. It's like, this is good. And Friday, I felt like I could do cartwheels. You know me, I'm not built for cartwheels no more at all. But I felt like I could run and jump and do cartwheels. Like, man, this is awesome. It took hold. It's great. Saturday was the same thing. Easter Sunday, it was about noon. We're walking through the church, and I told my wife, I said, there's something wrong. She said, what do you mean there's something wrong? I said, my legs are locking up on me. And we were working with the kids at that time, and I was trying to gather the younger kids back up. I said, I've got issues. I said, I can hardly move here. So me being hard-headed, went home, just kind of sat around, got up and clocked into work the next morning at 4:45 a.m. Being hard-headed. I wasn't going to let this hold me down. And the guys were trying to cover for me, and it got to the point to where I was hardly moving. I had to be escorted off the property. So I had switched jobs, and I was working for a company that is contracted to make ammunition for the U.S. military, and loved the job. Well, when you're dealing with explosives and you're having back issues and you can't walk, you're a liability, not only to yourself, but if you're to drop something and it goes boom,
everything goes boom.
Everything goes boom, right? And it's not just you going, you're taking a lot of people with you. So I was escorted off the property, and that's when everything started. So the spinal epidurals were done, started getting into MRIs and x-rays, and the whole time I was fixated with every doctor's visit I had. When you going to let me go back to work? You got to release me, let me go back to work. I was focused on the wrong thing. And I just kept on. I was being very persistent, you know.
It sounds like that was your identity. The work was your identity.
It was. And I realize that now. And that was part of the things that was ingrained in me, you know, through my father was, hey, you got to work, you know. I don't care if you fall and cut your arm, you know, rub some dirt in it and get up and go back, you know. You don't let anything like that hold you down. And that was who I was. It was the work. And it kept on progressing to where it finally got to the point they said on the MRI, I said, yeah, you've got issues back there. And they went in and done surgery. And I've got rods, I've got plates, I've got spacers, I've got screws from L4 down to my S1. And that's all bolted up and shimmed and spliced, you name it, you know, fused together. So they rebuilt that area. Well, that felt great. And I'm asking on my follow-up, all right, when do I go back to work? When do I go back to work? I said, listen, you got a lot of therapy to go through. You're not going back to work yet. Still very persistent on that. Then it got to the point to where something was wrong. The pain was going up my back and it was flaring out to both sides.
Hmm.
And went through the same process again, started doing MRIs and x-rays. And they ceased the therapy because the therapist is like, listen, he's not getting better. The pain is getting worse. He's hardly walking. And they're the ones that initiated the MRI again, the second MRI. So they done that, and I get called in for the reading. Before I left, I was at our church, and I was in the sanctuary. I was picking up communion cups. And I can remember that was my breaking point. I said, listen, I said, God, if you want me to go back to work, I'll go back to work. But if you don't, I'm hard-headed. You better make it really clear what you want me to do. And before I left, our pastor, TJ, he's like, hey, I want to talk to you. I said, okay, sure, no problem. He said, to be real quick. So it was probably 30 minutes later. I swung by his office, said, hey, I'm getting ready for my doctor's appointment. He said, I need to ask you something. He said, have you ever thought about a position here as a youth leader and working at the Christian school? Because we've got a Christian school here at the church. He said, and teaching, he said, Bible and history. I'm thinking, Bible's where I struggle, in my mind, that's
the biggest area of weakness.
where I struggle. That's like, and I'm going to be teaching this to 7th and 8th graders. I said, and didn't hesitate. I said, God, that's fast. He said, excuse me. I said, you don't understand. I was just praying in the sanctuary when I was picking up these communion cups. And this is what I asked. And this is what I said. I said, and now you've offered this. I said, I'm very interested in that. So, like I said, me being hard-headed, I get to the surgeon. He comes in, throws the MRI up. He said, this isn't good. Okay, what's going on? He said, everything has been bolted back together. He said, you're starting to herniate again. I said, okay. He said, that's not the problem. He said, all the way up to L2 is collapsing. He said, you've got advanced stages of degenerative back disease and advanced stages of facet degeneration. He said, where the nerves pass through, he said, it has collapsed right around I think it was L3 is what he said, L3. Yeah, L3 or L2 has collapsed. He said, it's pinching your nerves. He said, that's the reason you're struggling. He said, you stand up. He said, you've got an hour or two. He said, then my right leg will go numb if I stand up too long. If I sit down too long, so traveling all these shows, I'm like an hour in the car and I got to get out and walk because my left leg will start locking up on me and going numb. And so I had that going on and I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to go back to work, Doc? There I was right back to work. He said, well, we're going to start the spinal epidural. I said, that's great. I said, the first time it lasted 3 weeks. I said, the second time my legs locked up. I said, let's just say it works this third time. I said, you're telling me I've got no bending, no lifting, no twisting, and I've got a 5-pound weight restriction at that time. I said, let's just say it takes hold. I said, you release me to go back to work. I'm doing all these things that you tell me I'm not supposed to do. I said, I don't feel the pain. I continue to do damage to damage that is already there. And it gets worse. I said, let me ask you a question. When do I end up in the wheelchair? He said, no, you don't understand. You're not going back to work. I said, then what do you expect me to do? I said, I've got to go back to work. He said, have you ever thought about teaching school or working with the youth? I said, oh, okay. Funny story. And I told him, the conversation that our pastor had, that I had with my pastor. And he's like, I would probably look into that. So 3 days later, I follow up with my primary. And Adam is something else, but he walks in, no clipboard, no iPad, nothing in his hands. He's like, hey, I looked at your MRI. Well, I'm trying to call his bluff. I said, oh, really? What's it say, Adam? He said, well, he said, it's not good. He said, I haven't looked over the doctor's notes at all. He said, I just looked at the MRI, and he said, everything's collapsed. I said, so when do I go back to work? He said, you're not going back to work. He said, I don't know what you've thought about or anything. He said, but my dad used to be a school teacher.
There you go again.
And he's like, have you ever thought about teaching school and working with youth? So 3 times. And I was like, all right, God, this is very, very clear. So I started teaching Bible at our Christian school in history. I started working with the youth. My wife was director of student ministries and vice principal of the school. Since the past year, so March of last year, she went into full-time principal position. I became the director of student ministries and our youth leader at our church. So I get to teach that Bible every Sunday, every Wednesday.
So you actually have made a complete shift. It's almost like a 180-degree turn there, maybe even 360, going all the way back around. So we're getting close to the end of our time. I know that you're really heavily involved and you use Lego a lot, and I know that that's part of what you do as far as the teaching and everything else that's going on. And you've even got a show coming up here in August. But as we kind of wrap up, is there something like, what do you feel like you need to, like, if this is the one takeaway, what is the one takeaway that you want people to walk away with?
Well, one thing that I've noticed at the shows is when I do my mosaics and stuff, and people's looking at them, they always ask me what my background is. They said, are you an engineer? Well, okay, there's a lot of guys here at the shows, that are engineers or retired engineers, it's like, no, I'm a youth leader. I work at a church. And I've got the opportunity to say, listen, I told God no. I'm not telling him no again. Never tell God no. Stay on the wall. Don't listen to all these, different distractions, different opportunities, fear. You don't know the implications of what your life will be and who you will reach by staying on the wall and doing what God has called you to do. And that's one thing I would encourage people to do. Stay on the wall. Don't step down. Persevere, push through, and fight through all the distractions of life to finish the job that God has called you to do, and stay persistent with that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So how can people get in contact with you? I know you've got an Instagram channel. You focus on the brick. Is that the best way to get in touch with you?
So yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's TW_bricks. Got to be different. Throw that underscore in there. I'm also on YouTube, TW Bricks. But those are the 2 good avenues to reach me. I try to reach everybody I can on Instagram. So if you do send me a message, it may be delayed on getting a response. I do respond eventually.
Yeah.
I do get a lot of people that message me. So just hang in there. I will reply. I try to reply to everybody. It's kind of like some of the show aspects. And Tim, I know what you go through. And just like the last show that we were together at Indy, I know you're bombarded on Saturday and Sunday. I was bombarded on Saturday, Sunday, and it's like, now I get to breathe. Well, sometimes that's the way that Instagram and
100%
can be. You get bombarded on there. It's like, I will catch up. Honestly, I'll talk to everybody. But yeah, those are 2 great avenues to get a hold of me. You mentioned the show in August. That's down in Marion, Illinois.
It's called the Ultimate Brick Show for those that are listening and love to be working in and around Lego. We call it the Brick Show because it's what we have to do. But at the same time, it's really, truly, it's going to be a great show. I see all the people that you've got coming in, all of the designers, the Legos, all of the different pieces and parts that are actually coming together. So it's going to be a good one. And you're going to probably continue that every year. So if you're listening to this and it's several months later, it's most likely going to be in August. So look up Ultimate Brick Show, and you can meet us, I'm sure, and you can meet Tim Woods here. And oh man, Good stuff, dude. Really, really good stuff. So I personally want to say thank you for being on the show. Any last words, any last comments?
Well, like I said, just persevere and be true to your calling. Be true to your God.
Mm.
I can't say that enough. I know what happens when you say no. Just stay connected to God. Reach out to him daily. Don't live in fear, live in faith.
Yeah, so good. Well, once again, thanks guys for listening. We are going to have another awesome show next week, or they come out every Saturday. So love to be able to have you guys sign up, be a part of it. And we will continue to release these awesome stories of real life challenges, bends in the roads. Sometimes it's trauma, but we learn through it. And then we become better individuals because we really focus on what's important. And that's really truly crafting our own stories. So once again, thanks. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
See ya.